The rain drummed against the metal roof of Riverside Auction House like impatient fingers, but inside, the air crackled with the electric tension of serious money-changing hands. Millionaires in tailored suits adjusted their diamond cufflinks, while oil barons whispered into phones, orchestrating deals worth more than small countries' GDP. Tonight's auction promised to showcase the most magnificent thoroughbreds in North America, champions whose bloodlines traced back to legendary Kentucky Derby winners. But in the far corner of the holding area, forgotten and overlooked, stood a creature that defied every expectation. The tiny horse barely reached 3 feet tall, its coat a dusty brown that caught no one's attention under the harsh fluorescent lights, while champion stallions pranced and whinnied nearby, commanding armies of handlers and veterinarians. This diminutive animal stood perfectly still, as if understanding its place in the world's hierarchy. Its eyes, however, told a different story, deep, intelligent, almost human in their intensity. Cornelius Blackthorne III, heir to a shipping fortune, barely glanced in the tiny horse's direction as he examined a magnificent Arabian worth $3 million. "That one's got the breeding," he murmured to his assistant, pointing at the stallion. "Pure champion stock." The auctioneer's voice boomed across the packed auditorium as lot after lot sold for astronomical sums. $2 million. $5 million. $8 million for a single horse. The wealthy elite bid with casual waves of their hands, treating millions like pocket change. Meanwhile, in the back row of the auction house, Maverick Thornfield sat quietly in his worn denim jacket and scuffed boots. His weathered hands rested on his knees, calloused from decades of working his small farm in rural Tennessee. He'd driven 12 hours to be here, not to bid on million-dollar horses, but to observe, to learn, to understand what made these animals so special. Maverick had saved every penny from his modest crop sales for 3 years, hoping to find a horse that could help him work his land more efficiently. His old mare, Clementine, had passed last winter, leaving him to work the fields alone at 62 years old. He had exactly $4,000 to his name, a fortune to him, but laughably small in this room full of titans. As the evening wore on, the tiny horse's lot number approached. The auctioneer seemed almost embarrassed to present it. "Lot 47, he announced with noticeably less enthusiasm. A unique specimen, miniature horse, unregistered, unknown breeding. The millionaires didn't even look up from their phones. Conversations continued. Someone ordered another glass of champagne. The tiny horse was led into the ring, its small hooves clicking against the polished floor with quiet dignity. "Starting bid at $500, the auctioneer called out, his voice lacking conviction. Silence filled the auditorium like a heavy blanket. The tiny horse stood motionless in the center of the ring, its intelligent eyes scanning the crowd. Seconds ticked by. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Do I hear 500? More silence. Someone in the front row chuckled dismissively. That's when Maverick Thornfield slowly raised his weathered hand. The gesture was so quiet, so unassuming, that the auctioneer almost missed it. "I have 500 from the gentleman in the back," he announced, surprise evident in his voice. No counterbids came. The wealthy crowd remained focused on their conversations and their phones, completely uninterested in what they saw as an unremarkable creature. Going once, going twice. Sold. To the gentleman in denim for $500. As Maverick made his way forward to complete the purchase, none of the millionaires could have imagined that this simple farmer had just acquired something far more valuable than any champion thoroughbred in the building. The drive back to Tennessee stretched long through the night, but Maverick couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had just happened. In the trailer behind his pickup truck, the tiny horse traveled quietly, occasionally shifting its weight as they navigated winding mountain roads. Every few hours, Maverick pulled over to check on his new companion, offering water and gentle words. "Don't know what I'm going to call you yet," he said during one stop, studying the animal's remarkably calm demeanor. "But I've got a feeling we're going to figure each other out just fine." The tiny horse regarded him with those impossibly intelligent eyes. and Maverick could have sworn he saw understanding there, not just animal instinct, but genuine comprehension. By dawn, they reached Thornfield Farm, a modest spread of rolling hills and weathered wooden fences that had been in Maverick's family for 4 generations. The house needed paint, the barn required new shingles, and the fields showed the strain of being worked by one aging man. But there was beauty in its simplicity, peace in its isolation from the world's complications. Maverick led the tiny horse to a small paddock beside the barn, providing fresh hay and clean water. As the morning sun climbed higher, something remarkable began to happen. The tiny horse didn't just adapt to its new environment, it seemed to study it with scientific precision. While Maverick went about his morning chores, feeding chickens and checking fence lines, he noticed the tiny horse watching. Every movement, not with the idle curiosity of most animals, but with focused attention, as if cataloging and analyzing each task. Around mid-morning, Maverick began working on repairing a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. The work required precision, measuring posts, calculating angles, ensuring the wire tension was perfect. As he worked, he became aware that the tiny horse had approached the fence line and was observing his every movement. "You interested in construction work, little fellow?" Maverick chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. What happened next made him drop his hammer. The tiny horse walked deliberately to a pile of fence posts that Maverick had laid out. Using its teeth, it began moving the posts, arranging them in a precise pattern. Not randomly, not playfully, but with clear intent and mathematical precision. Maverick rubbed his eyes, certain he was seeing things. But there was no denying it. The tiny horse had arranged the posts in a perfect geometric sequence, each one positioned at exact intervals that would optimize fence stability. That's not possible," Maverick whispered. Over the following days, the tiny horse's behavior became increasingly extraordinary. When Maverick struggled with a broken water pump, the horse observed intently, then used its hooves to tap out a rhythm on metal pipes, a rhythm that perfectly diagnosed the pump's mechanical problem. When crows began destroying Maverick's crop, the tiny horse positioned itself strategically in the field and began making sounds, not typical horse sounds, but complex vocalizations that seemed to communicate with the birds. Within hours, the crows had departed and never returned. Most remarkably, when Maverick was reviewing his farm's financial records one evening, struggling with calculations that would determine whether he could afford winter feed, the tiny horse appeared at his side. On the dusty ground, using its hoof, it began drawing patterns in the dirt, mathematical equations that solved Maverick's financial planning problems with stunning accuracy. "What in God's name are you?" Maverick whispered, staring at the equations scratched in the earth. The tiny horse looked at him with those remarkable eyes, and for a moment, Maverick felt as though he was communicating with something far beyond his understanding, something that possessed knowledge and intelligence that defied every assumption about the natural world. As word began to spread through the small farming community about Maverick's unusual new companion, visitors started arriving. Other farmers came to witness the tiny horse's extraordinary abilities. Agricultural experts drove from universities. Even some reporters began sniffing around, drawn by stories too strange to believe. But Maverick protected his tiny friend fiercely, allowing only trusted neighbors to observe the remarkable demonstrations of intelligence. Deep down, he sensed that something far more significant was unfolding, something that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about intelligence, consciousness, and the nature of life itself. Late at night, as he watched the tiny horse gazing up at the stars with those penetrating eyes, Maverick couldn't shake the feeling that this creature was somehow not of this world. 3 weeks after bringing the tiny horse home, Maverick's quiet farm life was shattered by an arrival that changed everything. Dr. Celestine Voss, a xenobiologist from the National Institute of Advanced Sciences, pulled into his driveway in a black government sedan, her credentials and urgent demeanor immediately setting Maverick on edge. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, her voice carrying barely contained excitement. "I need to speak with you about your recent acquisition." Maverick studied the woman carefully. Mid-40s, sharp intellect evident in her piercing gaze, carrying herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to dealing with extraordinary phenomena. "Not sure what you mean, ma'am." "The miniature horse you purchased at Riverside Auction 3 weeks ago," Dr. Voss continued, consulting a tablet. "We've been tracking its movements through a network of contacts in the agricultural community. What you've acquired isn't exactly what it appears to be." Before Maverick could respond, the tiny horse appeared from behind the barn, moving with its characteristic quiet dignity. The moment Dr. Voss saw it, her professional composure cracked slightly, revealing underlying awe. "Magnificent," she whispered. "Even more remarkable than our projections suggested." "Lady, I think you've got the wrong farm," Maverick said instinctively, stepping between Dr. Voss and his companion. Dr. Voss smiled, but her expression remained serious. "Mr. Thornfield, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to listen carefully. 18 months ago, we detected an anomalous object entering Earth's atmosphere. Small, highly advanced, clearly of non-terrestrial origin. It crashed in the mountains of eastern Kentucky." Maverick felt his world tilting. "You're talking about a spacecraft," Dr. Voss confirmed. "Roughly the size of a large meteorite, but composed of materials we've never encountered. When our recovery team reached the crash site, they found no occupant, just sophisticated technology that had apparently been damaged beyond repair." The tiny horse had approached during their conversation, now standing quietly beside Maverick, its intelligent eyes fixed on Dr. Voss. "We've spent over a year analyzing the craft's remains," she continued. "The technology is centuries, possibly millennia beyond our current capabilities. But here's what's truly extraordinary. Genetic material recovered from the craft suggested that its occupant possessed the ability to adapt its physical form." Maverick's mouth went dry. "You're saying, we believe your horse is actually a highly advanced extraterrestrial being that has assumed this form for reasons we don't yet understand. The intelligence you've observed, the problem-solving abilities, the mathematical precision, these are just glimpses of a consciousness far beyond human comprehension." As if responding to their conversation, the tiny horse walked to a nearby patch of bare earth. Using its hoof with surgical precision, it began drawing. Not random scratches, but complex diagrams, star charts, mathematical formulas, and geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with meaning. Dr. Voss knelt beside the drawings, her hands trembling slightly as she photographed each symbol. "These are astronomical coordinates," she whispered. "And these equations, they're describing faster-than-light travel principles that our best physicists can only theorize about." Maverick stared at his companion with new understanding. "This time I thought you were just special." The tiny horse looked at him, and in that moment Maverick sensed something profound, not just intelligence, but emotion, gratitude, affection, perhaps even love. "Why here?" Maverick asked, addressing the creature directly. "Why choose this form? Why stay with me?" In response, the tiny horse began drawing again. This time, the images were simpler but more powerful. A representation of Earth, surrounded by darkness, then the same Earth surrounded by light. Below that, drawings of humans and animals living together in harmony. Dr. Voss studied the symbols intently. I think it's trying to tell us that it came here not as an invader, but as an observer, perhaps even as a protector." "But why disguise itself as a horse?" Maverick wondered aloud. The tiny horse drew one final image, a simple representation. 2 figures, one human and one horse, standing side by side. Above them it drew what could only be interpreted as a symbol for peace. It chose a form that would allow it to observe humanity closely, Dr. Voss realized. And it chose you, Mr. Thornfield, because your kindness and genuine nature made you trustworthy. As the implications sank in, Maverick felt a profound responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was harboring not just an extraterrestrial visitor, but possibly Earth's first real ambassador from another world. Word of Dr. Voss's visit spread through the scientific community like wildfire, and within days, Thornfield Farm became the center of the most significant discovery in human history. Black SUVs lined the country road leading to Maverick's property, filled with government officials, military personnel, and scientists from around the world. General Rutherford Knox, a stern man with silver hair and cold eyes, established a command center in Maverick's kitchen, much to the farmer's growing frustration. "Mr. Thornfield," the general said, spreading classified documents across the worn wooden table, "you need to understand the gravity of this situation. We're dealing with first contact with an alien species. This is a matter of national security. It's a matter of common decency." Maverick shot back, his patience wearing thin. "This creature chose to trust me, and I won't betray that trust." Outside, behind the barn where they thought no one could see, the tiny horse was engaged in increasingly complex communications with Dr. Voss and her team. Using combinations of hoof taps, strategic movements, and ground drawings, it had begun, sharing technological concepts that were revolutionizing human understanding of physics, energy, and space travel. But the pressure from government officials was mounting. They wanted to transfer the being to a secure facility for proper study and protection. They spoke of research opportunities, of advancing human civilization, of the potential military applications of alien technology. "You don't understand," Maverick said during one heated meeting. "This isn't just some specimen to be studied. This is a living, thinking being that chose to trust humanity. If we betray that trust now, what does that say about us?" Dr. Voss found herself caught between her scientific curiosity and growing respect for the creature's autonomy. Late one evening, she approached Maverick as he sat on his porch, watching the tiny horse graze peacefully in the moonlight. "It's been trying to communicate something important," she said quietly. "Something about time." "What do you mean?" "The mathematical sequences it's been drawing. They're not just about space travel, they're about temporal mechanics. I think it's telling us that it's here for a specific period, for a specific purpose." As if summoned by their conversation, the tiny horse approached the porch and began drawing in the dirt below the steps. This time the symbols were unmistakable, a countdown sequence clearly indicating that its time on Earth was limited. "How long?" Maverick asked, his voice heavy with sudden sadness. The horse drew carefully, precisely. 7 symbols, 7 days. "It's going home," Dr. Voss whispered. But the drawings continued. The tiny horse sketched what appeared to be a choice, 2 different paths branching from the countdown. In one path it showed itself surrounded by humans, in what looked like laboratory conditions. In the other it showed itself here, on the farm, with Maverick. "It's asking us to choose," Maverick realized. "It's saying it will stay if we want to study it, or it will leave peacefully if we let it go." The weight of the decision was staggering. Dr. Voss thought about the scientific breakthroughs that could emerge from continued contact, cures for diseases, solutions to climate change, advances in space exploration that could secure humanity's future among the stars. But Maverick thought about something simpler and perhaps more profound: the trust of a being from another world, and what humanity's response to that trust would say about the species' readiness to join a larger cosmic community. "What do you think it wants?" Dr. Voss asked. The tiny horse looked directly at Maverick, and in those remarkable eyes the farmer saw something that broke his heart and filled it simultaneously. The creature wanted to go home. It had completed its mission, whatever that mission had been, and now it wanted to return to whatever world, whatever family, whatever life awaited it among the stars. "It wants to leave," Maverick said quietly. "And I think we should let it." Dr. Voss was quiet for a long moment. "The general won't agree to that. Neither will the politicians. They'll say we're throwing away the greatest opportunity in human history." "Maybe," Maverick said. "The greatest opportunity in human history is proving that we're worthy of trust." That night, as government officials slept in their temporary quarters and security teams patrolled the property, Maverick made a decision that would define not just his own legacy, but humanity's first impression on the cosmic stage. He was going to help his friend go home. At 3 in the morning, when the government surveillance teams were at their most vulnerable to human fatigue, Maverick quietly slipped from his house and made his way to the barn. The tiny horse was waiting for him, as if it had sensed his decision. "You ready to go home, friend?" Maverick whispered. The creature nodded, an unmistakably human gesture that carried profound meaning. Working together with the quiet efficiency born of weeks of mutual understanding, they moved through the farm's back pastures, avoiding the perimeter, guards, and surveillance equipment. Maverick had spent his entire life on this land. He knew every hidden path, every blind spot, every way to move unseen. Dr. Voss was waiting at the predetermined meeting point, a clearing in the woods where she'd secretly positioned her personal vehicle. Her decision to help hadn't come easily, but her respect for the being's autonomy had ultimately overridden her scientific ambitions. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, as they loaded the tiny horse into her specially modified trailer. "More sure than I've ever been about anything," Maverick replied. They drove through the night toward the coordinates the tiny horse had indicated, a remote plateau in the Great Smoky Mountains where, according to its communications, extraction would be possible. As they climbed the winding mountain roads, the tiny horse remained calm, occasionally making soft sounds that seemed almost like expressions of gratitude. By dawn, they reached the designated location, a flat expanse of rock surrounded by ancient trees with a clear view of the sky in all directions. The beauty of the place was breathtaking, but more importantly, it felt right, peaceful, sacred somehow. The tiny horse stepped from the trailer and walked to the center of the clearing. For the first time since Maverick had known it, the creature seemed to shimmer slightly, as if its carefully maintained disguise was beginning to slip. "How long do we wait?" Dr. Voss asked. Their answer came as a low humming sound filled the air. Not mechanical but organic, like the earth itself was singing. Above them, the morning sky began to change, colors shifting in patterns that human eyes had never before witnessed. The tiny horse looked back at Maverick one final time, and in that gaze, the farmer saw a lifetime of friendship compressed into a single moment. Gratitude, affection, and something deeper, a recognition of the bond that had formed between two beings from different worlds. Then the humming intensified, and a gentle light began to surround the tiny horse. Not harsh or blinding, but warm and welcoming, like sunlight filtered through leaves. "My God," Dr. Voss whispered, her scientific instruments recording phenomena that would take decades to fully understand. As the light grew brighter, the tiny horse's form began to change. The disguise fell away gradually, revealing glimpses of something beautiful and otherworldly, a being of pure energy and consciousness that had chosen to experience life as a simple farm animal. The transformation was stunning, but what moved Maverick most was the expression in those intelligent eyes, which remained constant throughout the change. The friendship was real. The bond they'd shared was genuine, regardless of the physical form it had taken. With a final pulse of light that seemed to carry every emotion at once, farewell, gratitude, love, and hope, the being ascended into the morning sky, merging with colors and patterns that gradually faded back to normal blue. The clearing fell silent, except for the whisper of wind through the trees. Maverick stood quietly for a long time, feeling both the profound sadness of goodbye and the deep satisfaction of having done the right thing. Dr. Voss busied herself with her equipment, but he could see tears in her eyes. "Do you think we'll ever see it again?" she asked finally. Maverick smiled, looking up at the sky where his friend had disappeared. "I think that depends on what kind of species we prove ourselves to be." As they prepared to leave the clearing, Dr. Voss made one final discovery. Etched into the rock where the tiny horse had stood were symbols, not the complex mathematical formulas it had drawn before, but something simpler and more beautiful. A message of thanks, written in a universal language of love and friendship. 6 months after the departure, Thornfield Farm had returned to a semblance of normalcy, though nothing would ever truly be the same. The government officials had eventually departed, their reports filed away in classified archives. Dr. Voss had published carefully sanitized papers about anomalous behavioral patterns in domestic animals, never mentioning the true nature of her discoveries. But Maverick knew the real story was just beginning. The tiny horse had left behind more than memories. In the weeks following its departure, strange and wonderful things began happening on the farm. Crops grew with unprecedented vitality, producing yields that defied agricultural science. The soil itself seemed enriched with something beyond conventional understanding, not just minerals and nutrients, but something that promoted life in its most fundamental forms. Other farmers in the region began reporting similar phenomena. Livestock displayed increased intelligence and health. Wild animals showed unusual cooperative behaviors. The very ecosystem seemed to be evolving, becoming more harmonious and sustainable. Dr. Voss visited regularly, documenting changes that she privately believed were the result of the being's presence. It wasn't just observing us, she explained. To Maverick during one visit, it was healing the land, preparing it for something. Preparing it for what? I think, she said carefully, it was preparing Earth for membership in a larger community. The evidence supported her theory. Around the world, similar phenomena were being reported. Environmental improvements that seemed to emerge from nowhere, technological breakthroughs that scientists couldn't quite explain, and a growing sense among many people that humanity was on the verge of something extraordinary. Maverick had become something of a reluctant philosopher. His simple farm drawing visitors from around the world who somehow sensed that something important had happened there. He welcomed them all. Scientists, spiritual seekers, curious neighbors, and lost souls looking for meaning. What was it like? They invariably asked. Living with a being from another world? It was like having the best neighbor you could imagine, Maverick would reply. Someone who worked hard, caused no trouble, and made everything around them better just by being there. On the first anniversary of the tiny horse's departure, Maverick was working in his garden when he noticed something extraordinary. A pattern in the way his vegetables were growing. Not random, but organized in subtle geometric arrangements that seemed almost like a message. As he studied the pattern more closely, he realized what he was seeing. The plants were arranged to spell out words visible only from above, words that made his heart soar with recognition and hope. Thank you, ready now, friends coming soon. That evening, as Maverick sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, he reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought him to this moment. A simple farmer had been chosen to be humanity's first ambassador to the stars, not because of his wealth or education, but because of his capacity for kindness and trust. The tiny horse had tested humanity's readiness to join a cosmic community, and somehow, miraculously, they had passed that test. Not through grand gestures or impressive technology, but through the simple act of treating a stranger with dignity and respect. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Maverick smiled. Somewhere out there among those distant points of light, his friend was telling the story of Earth, not as a world of primitive, hostile beings, but as a planet inhabited by creatures capable of love, friendship, and the wisdom to recognize kinship across the vastness of space. The next phase of human history was about to begin, and it would be built on the foundation of trust established in a humble farmyard between a man and a tiny horse who wasn't really a horse at all. In the distance, Maverick could swear he heard a familiar sound, the gentle whinnying of his old friend, carried on the evening breeze like a promise of wonders yet to come. The story of the tiny horse had ended, but the story of humanity's journey to the stars had just begun.